Hey, welcome everybody. Glad you are here. Just got to approve all the note takers. So we're having a lot of notes being taken, which is great. Welcome. Um, for those of you who might be new, my name is Bill Fanning and I help run Talk and really glad that you made some time today to come join us. For those of you who are coming back, thank you. Glad you're here and really excited to have an interesting conversation today about um, job descriptions, the process of building them, and some of the things that are going on in the market today. If you can turn your camera on, be awesome. Makes a much more community feel. If for some reason you're eating lunch, you can't totally understand, but I always like to ask. And we're gonna give about another 30 to 60 seconds for people to come in, and then we'll be off to the races. So glad everyone's here. And hopefully you're enjoying sunshine and warm weather. I'm super excited. It's actually warm enough here that sunny enough here. I had to close the shades behind my back because it was making me look sort of angelic, like I had this glow around me. So um, I had to take that off because, as probably my wife can attest, there's not a lot angelic. I'm not glowing with light. So awesome. All right. And everybody can see my screen, so that's good. All right, we got some people rolling in, so I got a thumbs up. Thanks, Norm. So I'm excited today for this conversation because this is an area that my background is recruitment advertising and recruiting. And one of the things that always used to be a joke um, in recruitment advertising, working for different service providers, was the nature of job descriptions and how clunky they were, how bad they were, especially when I was working in the world of AI and people would give me a job description or put a job description into the sourcing tool and then be surprised at what it pulled back. And we'd be like, well, why did it pull these people? And we'd go, well, did you read your job description? And then there'd kind of be a chuckle and we'd fix it and it would start working. But it's really interesting. So I'm really excited for this conversation because it's been it's been an area that I've always been interested in. So I'm glad Scott's here and he's able to join us, and I'm really excited for the conversation. Just a couple quick things. Talk 2.0 is definitely under development. I plan on taking some time to finish it up over the next couple days, and so we'll be rolling people in and be starting to explore the new platform in a logical way, and I'll have more information about that soon. Definitely working on the Talk podcast. It's what I've realized as I kind of jumped the gun in putting it together. And so I'm doing a little bit of the background work to set the podcast up and the brand and all of that great stuff. But I'm making progress, and so we will be launching that soon. If anybody is interested, I'll drop that link into chat once I'm done talking. And if you're interested in being a guest, please come join us. And I'm putting together a list of potential people to be on the podcast, and all are welcome. And we have some great discussions coming up. Today is using AI job descriptions or just job descriptions in general. And you can see we have a couple other things that are coming up over the next couple weeks for the month of May. So really some great conversations to be had and excited for each of them. So just want to give you a quick heads up on that. The other thing, if you're new to Talk or you're joining us through LinkedIn, um, and you're not a member, please feel free to join. Talk is a great community. It is all about sharing insights, knowledge, and collaborating with one another, building our TA network. It's free to join, and that's a big part of what we hold true to our community. So you're definitely welcome. And just QR code would bring you right in, or just go to the website and sign up. So if you're new, we're excited you're here. Final thing I wanted to just mention before I introduce Scott is I think it's 6 weeks away from Talent Sphere, might be five, which is our conference. It's taking place June 3rd through the 5th in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'll also put some more information about this in chat, but it's a really fun retreat type experience that we're put together, focused on talent acquisition. One of the things that's really cool about it is that our speakers are TA practitioners. So one of the things that when putting this together, we did a little bit of research, And we had a lot of people say, hey, it's great that vendors are there, but I want to hear other leaders speaking about how they're solving problems, not vendors speaking about their technology. So we have people speaking about that are TA leaders just like you, really interactive and collaborative sessions. And it's definitely also focused on wellness. So we're going to create a balanced agenda while we're there. So it should be really fun. And finally, I wanted to introduce Scott, and been talking to Scott for a while. Phenomenal background, great thinker around these technologies, and some great articles that he's put together that I've been fortunate enough to read. So I'm really excited he's here. Um, one of the things that Scott and I were talking about yesterday, and I'll just start with this before I turn it over to Scott, is we talk a lot about, and as he has in his name, AI. And I think in a lot of people, including myself, it can create a sense of apprehension or fear, right? Oh my God, what is this going to be or do? But one of the things that I continually challenge myself on is to thinking past that and actually being open-minded to what is a great way that AI can help me rather than threaten or challenge me. And so I wanted to start with that because I think this is a great mindset to have as we go into this conversation. Think just thinking in it, of what things can be going forward. So Scott, I'm gonna shut off my screen share and I'm gonna turn it over to you. And I'll certainly be here to moderate along the conversation, but really excited to get things going and wanted to give you a chance to kind of introduce yourself to everybody.
Bill, I appreciate it, and thank you again for the invite. I'm really happy to be here. I will. I'll tell you a little bit about my background to get going, and just so you have some context for who I am and what I've done. I've been about 25 years in the profession of people ops, and that for my portfolio over that time, that's always included talent acquisition. About 20 of those years in C-level roles. And you can see from the slide, I've worked in a bunch of different contexts, and I've recruited the executive team for two different companies, two different industries. So I've always been on the front line of the things that all of us go through, whether we're leading TA teams or whether we are the actual recruiter ourselves. I am currently the CEO of Propulsion AI. We make a software that helps in the process. But I think one thing I'd like to make clear to you, the ideas that I'm going to share with you today are ideas that my teams have been pursuing for the last 15 years. And whether you use our software or not is less consequential than that you take the techniques and drive them into your organization. Because at the end of the day, it's not about what software package you use. It's really about how effective you are at helping your organization to succeed. And I'm willing to bet you came in with a really specific idea about about talent acquisition and about job descriptions in general. And I hope when we get to the end of the presentation and hopefully our conversation, you've got a total change of mind about how you think about the importance of that job description. Because while most of us have allowed it to be an administrative document, I'm going to show you how it's a business value driver. Let's start, if you will. I'm gonna clear the screen share here for a second, Bill, and if you don't mind, can you drop in the poll questions? Just a couple of questions to just kick us all off and kind of get us going here.
So hopefully everybody can see there's three questions in the poll. Hopefully everyone can see them, and definitely interested to see how they rank. I have to say, Scott, one of the interesting question to me was the second question of who generally crafts the job description for a role in the company. And it's interesting because in a lot of my experience, it's been multiple people bringing content or components of the job description together, and the output has been kind of a fluid, changing document. Let's
You
say
make
it.
a great point. It's amazing the amount of cutting and pasting that we do from the internet, which ultimately leads us to job postings, at least, that look exactly like everybody else's and don't really drive anything home for us in terms of the type of talent that we're able to attract and ultimately select.
Yeah, awesome.
How are we doing on the results? Are you
But
able, you're
I'm gonna end the poll right now, and we can take a look at the results. So they should be coming up right now.
all right. So it looks like we're sort of the middle of the bell curve in terms of effectiveness. I'm going to be interested in your own assessment of your job descriptions when we finish, the same that I am here. So it looks like the sevens, eights look like they have it. Six, seven, eights have it. So I interpret that. I'm going to use a technical term for that, and I think it's meh, meh,
Yeah.
kinda. Let's hit the next one, Bill.
Hopefully you guys should be able to just scroll down and see the second one.
Oh, shoot. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I didn't realize that. I actually just closed mine, so I've lost the ability to see them.
Okay. Well,
Oh, what is this? Nope, never mind. I got back to it. All right, so second one, and I'm guessing everybody's kind of ahead of me on the scroll. Who writes it? The manager. That's, in my opinion, that's a great result. We're starting in a really good place with 41% of us having the manager really be accountable for the direct writing. I'm going to talk a little bit in some of the material I have about why that is so critically important. I'm curious as to the somebody else. Can anybody pipe in and just tell me really quickly before we get going, who's the somebody else that writes these things for you?
That was me, but we can talk about that later. No, it
Ah,
was
okay.
clients. Clients sometimes do. And
Clients.
yeah, and I can't really tell sometimes who on the client side does, but sometimes you get good descriptions and sometimes you get a few sentences.
Anybody
Does that
else in that 14%? And thank you, Audrey, for the compliment on me, and I'm picking the right technical term. Was anybody else in the someone else camp? Here's probably the most troubling, from my point of view, the most troubling result is 64% of you just said that we use the same materials for the job description and for the posting. And I'm gonna show you some really good reasons why you should be thinking differently than that. Let me share my screen again, and let's talk about the real problem here. And the problem that a lot of us experience is that hiring mistakes and misaligned hires are incredibly expensive for us. And I want to drop some stats to you. And I've got six of them for you. The first is, I think, probably the most impactful, at least for me. There was a study that Forbes published that followed 20,000 new hires. 46% of them failed in their first 18 months. 80% of turnover, you can see the stat. That's an incredibly high number. And the problem's pretty universal. That is a career builder survey of those managers. And if that holds across the entire population, that's pretty serious. A worse problem, I think, than making a hiring mistake is making a hiring mistake and not correcting it. Fully disengaged employees tend to produce about 60% of their payroll value. And that means that we're losing zero point 0.4 FTE for every fully disengaged employee that we have in the organization. And a large component, I'm going to posit to you today, of disengagement is lack of clarity and lack of meaning in that employee's work. And the way that we communicate that is through the job description and through the day-to-day management that direct manager exercises over that employee. I think another one that is unseen but worth mentioning, even though it's on the slide, is that third stat about underperforming employees and the 17% of time, which is almost a day a week. If you think about it, 20% is about a day in an average working week. That's the amount of time that managers are spending on underperforming employees. So the act of getting the right people into the right roles is incredibly important. But at the risk of contradicting myself, I'm going to tell you that I don't think that's really the problem. I think this is an outcome. The expense and the pain that is wrought on the organization as a result of the hiring mistakes that we make is really just the result that we see. Underneath it is a big problem. And I'm going to break that problem into three parts for you. The first one is we're starting with the wrong mindset. And I want to give you an example really, really quickly. If I asked any of you right now to write a check for $100,000 to me as an investment in my company, you would probably ask me some very pointed questions. And the thing that I think is interesting is there are really strong themes in these questions. You might have your own, but among them might be, how are you going to create value with that check that I write? That $100,000 that I give you, how are you going to create value? Second question is, or likely question is, what kind of return can I expect on that money that I give you? And the third question is, over what time frame? And whether that's the exact phrasing you use or not, I'm willing to bet you thought about at least one of those questions. Now, what I think is interesting is those questions are really accessible when we're talking about writing checks and making financial investments. Yet that thinking somehow breaks down when it comes to hiring. Salary is an investment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the mindset that I think we get wrong. We think about filling roles, we think about time to hire, we don't think about salary as an investment. And I'm a little curious about you sharing some of your own experiences. Why do you think that thinking breaks down? Why is that not our natural starting point? And if it is for you, by the way, on any of these things, right? You have your own experiences. If your point of view challenges mine, I'm cool with that. Speak up, makes the discussion better. Where do we go wrong? Why is this not our mindset on hiring? Somebody's got to take a risk and come off mute, or minimally open up your camera so I can see you as you just stare at me. No one wants to deal with it. Do you mean me asking you to come off mute and talk about this, Christy? Or do you mean because nobody wants to deal with the concept of salary as an investment? Christy's struggling. The second one, nobody wants to, okay, thanks, Christy. Nobody wants to deal with it. I'm not sure exactly, Christy, what you mean by that, but what other things might be in the way? Repeat the question. Sorry about that, Savannah. So we're talking about this notion of salary as an investment. If I'm asking you to write me a check as an investment for my business, you ask me very specific questions about where value gets created and what the return is. Why do we not use that same logic and that same thought process when it comes to making hires in our organization?
Okay, I'm going to step in.
I love you, Audrey.
I think strategy is not part of the process, and especially in TA. I'm going to say that.
Say more.
So think of it as this way, as at least in my space, TAs become order takers, sort of like just butts in seats, versus the idea that you are strategic in your plan, your job description, your intake meeting with your hiring managers. And we tend to, in the referral process or anything else, hire our neighbor, people who look like us, versus being strategic in our recruitment marketing at reach out. So I just feel like there needs to be, I'm a marketer at heart sitting now in TA. Strategy is my bottom line. To tell my team, I have strategy docs everywhere, but my team like freaks out at that one. So I just think that's missing in general, and hence none of that is an investment, as you were saying.
You know, I'll give you my own kind of version of why I think it happens, or why I've watched it happen. And I agree with your point of view wholeheartedly, Audrey. It's not easy is another reason. It's just intellectually hard. It's very easy for most of us to touch tasks because we see those fires burning every day. But it's harder to start thinking about that deeper connection. Who can add to either of those before we move on? So mindset's wrong. Here's the one thing that I want you to take out of that comment, right? Salary is an investment. It leads us to move our focus away from the tasks, away from people's experience, and lets us focus more specifically on people who can produce a return on the investment. That becomes a critical factor. Part two of the problem is I think we're missing the root cause of hiring challenges. And there's not a shortage right now of popular press articles that talk about the recruiting process being broken. And I want you to pause there for a second, because if you've heard that, or if you've said that, and I say it a lot, it's a suitcase term and we need to unpack it. And when you think about it, the recruiting process as we know it has four major components to it. Now, we can make some side components and some subcomponents to this, but these are the four major components. Would you agree? We're going to go find candidates. We're going to screen them. We're going to interview them. And we're ultimately going to bring somebody into the organization. And we call that talent acquisition. But there's a theme that runs through all four of those that facilitates performance for our recruiters and for the organization in each one of those slots. And that's the concept of role design. And when you think about it, if I'm a manager and I am thoughtful about the design of the role, and when I see design of the role, here's what I mean. How does that role fit into your strategy? What are the outcomes that you need in order to have a person be successful? What are they generating for you? Think salary as an investment. What are the concrete and specific and objective measures of success? And what are the competencies and skills that are going to let somebody perform well in that role? That's the role design. And when you think about it, if I, as a manager, if I sit down and I'm really thoughtful about those four components, then what I'm going to wind up doing is handing off a spec to my recruiter that is going to let that recruiter totally understand what I think is necessary in that role. And as a result of that, screening is going to get more targeted, or sourcing, excuse me, and screening is going to get a lot faster. And I know, some of you are leading talent organizations and some of you are recruiters in talent organizations, but all of us have heard the following. I think I need to see more candidates. And that's an indicator that that manager didn't have a really firm idea of what they were looking for coming into the process. Because if they did, we would have found it, and we would have been able to put them in front of them. Further, though, that role design lets interviewing become shorter and more targeted. Think about the ideal interview structure. You want to be able to break people up. You want them to help you get a 360-degree view of that candidate. And yet, what we wind up doing is putting candidates into interviews where the questions are repeated, where the inquiry is winding and sort of wandering. And ultimately, we damage our employment brand. We lengthen the amount of time that it takes to get through that interview process. And we don't select the right candidate because when we get to that selection decision, we're asking our interviewers questions like, what did you think? Or how did you feel about these people? And those are not effective questions. What we should be doing is comparing a candidate to an objective standard. And we know that. Every one of us who's worked in TA knows that. That's not PhD level work on my part, right? The problem is stuff gets in the way. And my point to you is that's the piece that we're missing. That's the root cause element that we're missing. That role design makes the difference. Let me throw some more stats your way. That the typical small to medium-sized business is losing a significant chunk of their top-line revenue as a result of hiring mistakes and misaligned hires. And the cost of turnover is pretty high. Remember, 80% of turnover is attributable to hiring mistakes. And if you look at the cost that SHRM is estimating for the replacement cost for an individual that's churned, 80% becomes a really significant number. So the thing that I want you to remember here is thoughtful role design is going to unlock and unbreak, I believe, every one of the stages of that hiring process. It's not that you need to do a better job interviewing, it's that you need to be more targeted in those interviews. Part 3 of that problem, we're missing a major opportunity. And by that, what I mean is there's a triple win that we should be looking for that we're not capitalizing on. Organizations want growth and profitability. Managers want individuals that take initiative and embrace accountability. And if you look at any of the stuff, especially for Gen Z that's being talked about today, employees are looking for meaning and purpose. And we're missing each other on this front because we're failing to do one thing, and it's one incredibly critical thing, and that is to shift ourselves from a focus on tasks to a focus on outcomes. Now, if you think about Audrey's comment earlier, or I guess it was my comment, that the tasks are really accessible to people. You think about, if you're going to hire a role, what's the first thing that goes on your mind? It's what do you want the job to do? And that's how we write job descriptions. And here comes the connection that you've been looking for to the job description, right? Most job descriptions read like obituaries. And the reason is that they are loaded up with tasks. Think about your own work. Think about what you're accountable for. If your boss comes to you and says, here's the thing that I want you to do, what kind of position does that put you in? How do you feel about that job? Is it more engaging? Is it less engaging? It's no different for the people that we're hiring. It's no different for the people that we're employing. So let me give you an example here. And the example that I want to use is of an accountant. If we were going to hire an accountant and we were writing a job description for that accountant, most of us would be naturally inclined to write something in like follow up on delinquent accounts. Seem reasonable? What does that mean to an end? Do we write that in because we need to come and watch somebody sit at a desk, make phone calls to people that don't want to get them, send emails to people that aren't going to read them? Is it the effort that's really important to us? At the end of the day, like, think about a sports team, right? That team, they win because they ran up and down the field the most. It's a means to an end. What really counts is the goal that they scored when they ran down the field. And what really counts for that accountant in this example is not following up on delinquent accounts, but it's a number called days outstanding. It's a measure of accounting efficiency, and it goes directly to cash flow for the business. And if you don't believe me, let me show you an example of why that really matters. Because we'll do some math here really quickly. Let's say we've got a company and that company's total revenue is 10 million. And what that breaks down to, if you divide that by 12, that means that the MRR, the monthly recurring revenue for that business, is about $833,000. Now let's further assume that days outstanding, the amount of time it takes us to collect, is 90 days. Now, if we collect on that revenue in 60 days rather than 90 days, we create an acceleration of cash flow of $833,000. That is almost $1 million of value that's created from that accountant moving the 90-day days outstanding to 60 days. Now think about what you also facilitate. If you need to watch somebody's effort, you need to have them in the office. If this is the calculus that we're making with what people are returning to the business or the value that they're generating for the business, do you care where I work? Remote work gets facilitated through this kind of thinking. It's not just the value that gets created for the business, it's the value that gets created for the individual. And when you think about it, isn't it way more engaging for an individual to be told, hey, look, your job is days outstanding. Days outstanding is really meaningful to the business, and here's why. And that's what I want you to be accountable for. So by shifting the focus, we move away from a task and into an outcome. We're going to unlock a bunch of different things. Now, I'd love it if we had a more active conversation about this than we did about the first one. And I think there's more meat here. What gets in the way of this kind of thinking? Let's start with that. And then I want to talk about how we overcome it. How do we change and how do we get managers to shift their focus from tasks to outcomes? Let's start by just naming the things, and we don't need to have a full discussion on all of them. Let's just get the ideas out there. Why are managers, when that kind of math is present, why are managers focusing on tasks and not outcomes? What could be some of the reasons?
Because they don't know any better.
Fair enough. And sometimes they don't have a guide. I will tell you, bandwidth for every one of my talent acquisition teams was a major issue. And where I wanted them was with candidates. I wanted them doing what they were expert at doing, and that was sourcing, screening, and really getting into the background of our top talent. Thank you, Michael, for that. What are some other reasons?
I think a couple things in chat that people had dropped out was poor leadership style could potentially be it. Bandwidth people are at 100%. So stepping back and thinking that way could be tough. Miranda dropped that in. Um, another vote on poor leadership. Um, I would challenge. So just for a thought, let's challenge poor leadership for a bit. But if we step back from a leader's perspective and things have always been done a certain way, then maybe they're just executing on the norm. It's not poor leadership. It's what they think a leader should do in that role of putting that together. I don't know. That's, because when you think about day sales outstanding, it being the focus of reducing it rather than the task to get there, to me, that creates a much more compelling discussion with any of the candidates. Like, how would you approach this versus how do you accomplish these tasks? But that just an idea that I had as I'm thinking about poor leadership as an example.
Bill, that might tie to change management issues,
Yeah.
right? People can be very resistant to change. We do things a certain way, thinking outside. TA has changed and evolved very quickly, continues to. Maybe it's those two are tied together, leadership as well as change management.
Yeah.
So one thing to point out about change, since you bring that up, Audrey, I think it's generally true. Change management, without a doubt, is a problem. And in that sense, I think your point is really well made. But people don't fear change. They fear loss. And a key to helping them change is helping illuminate for them what they are not going to lose. In fact, in this case, it's what they're going to gain. Because the second I start to define a job by its tasks, I set myself up for something major that as a manager, I want to avoid. You want to hazard a guess before I give you my version of it? Anybody want to chime in? Starts with an M, sounds like micromanagement. Not to give away the answer.
Yeah, I was going to say you're right.
It's micromanagement, right? If I'm defining a role in terms of its tasks, if that's what I'm writing into the job description, then I've got to monitor those tasks. Most managers will tell you, I want people that take initiative and embrace accountability because I have other things to do. And I think that's one thing that we can do as talent professionals is raise that with them as we're helping them to design the roles. Because this unlocks, look, the result is the result, right? If I get somebody focused on the result, then the tactics become the subject for experimentation. I want them to play around with that. And what I get to do is manage by saying, hey, let's look at the number. Has it moved? It's an easier style of management than, are you making those calls? How many calls did you make today? And having to look over that person's shoulder. What are some other reasons? So Michael says they don't know how. And I think that's a good one. Audrey says maybe a change problem, maybe the way that manager was led in their past. What are some other possible reasons that the shift from tasks to outcomes is difficult for people?
I think it can be hard if somebody's not doing their job effectively to kind of challenge them on what they're missing or what they're not doing. So I think for managers, they want to get what they see as the duties locked into the job description so that they can come back and say, this was my expectation of you, and this is, you're not delivering on these tasks. So I think that side of it comes into play.
I think your idea on this is right, Rosalie. If you don't mind, I'm going to push you for just one further comment. What's your perspective on why? Why is it easier for a manager to push somebody on a task than to push somebody on a result?
I think that it's usually they've been broken in the past by somebody who didn't do what they needed to do, and they've got to the position where they feel that they need to micromanage, or they feel that they need to kind of be quite dictatorial about kind of how to do things. And that usually is where that energy is coming from. But I think that they perceive the only way to get to this outcome is by doing these tasks. So they want to be very clear from the offset that this is what's needed to arrive there. But I think that the discussion of repositioning is helpful, but that's usually what I understand they're thinking when they're putting the job description together.
I think that's a reasonable point. And I think it's also reasonable to point out managers have job descriptions too. And the way that we write those job descriptions may largely determine the kind of management, the style of management that we get. What other thoughts do you have? Why is it so challenging for managers to make this mental shift? Let's move to how do we get past some of these things. So we've heard they don't know how, we've heard they don't want to. We've heard there may be some change obstacles. We've heard they may have been managed poorly in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And we've heard, they may just want, and I know I'm paraphrasing here, Rosalie, they may want, it's easier to be punitive than it is inspirational and focused on the result. How do we move them past? What have you seen effective? Because you've moved people off of difficult obstacles in your past previously. What's worked?
I think you could just kind of move them through, just talk it through with them. So just what do you feel that we lose from approaching it this way rather than that way? So if you've got a suggestion for what it could look like to talk about the outcome on a job description, just go through it with them and just say what risks do you see, and then just work through each of those scenarios with them, because you'll probably find that there isn't a risk, and that will help them feel a little bit more in control of what might happen.
I love that as a suggestion. And questions are, and I'll share some of mine in a second with you. I think questions are a great way of driving that thinking. I think the first strategy that I use is recognizing that they aren't going to come easily and that I'm going to have to lead them into it. It's not a light switch for most people. But here's what I've found. That is that the more they do it, the easier it gets. What are some other strategies? Questions work. What else? Let me tell you a question that I use frequently with managers that really helps them see what they're gaining rather than what they're losing. And that is, what's going to thrill you? When you hire this person, when they perform well, what are they doing that is absolutely going to thrill you? Now, that question becomes important because they will start to rattle off stuff that I can use. Anybody that's attending worked in manufacturing before? Do I have any manufacturing colleagues? I spent about 5 years working in manufacturing in Costa Rica. And yes, Sil, can you tell me about 5 whys? Can you tell us about 5 whys and what the exercise is? No? Maybe the mute button is stuck for Sil. Here's what 5 whys does. 5 whys is a way of uncovering a root cause. GE Black Belt 101. Good job, Bill. All right. 5 whys uncovers. So you want to ask, so what thrills you, Bill, about if this person performs well, right? And your answer is going to be, they make all the calls I told them to make. The next question is, okay, so why is that going to thrill you? What is that going to do for you? And the idea is you're going to get down 5 questions and you're going to be closer to the root cause. What is really at the root of what's important to them? Those questions are a totally non-threatening way to bring your manager to the table and help them to get into the design of that role. What other strategies? The why question works, and it works pretty well. And let me show you what you're aiming for. So we talked about that follow-up on delinquent accounts. Here's the task focus. Here's the outcomes focus. What if we had a marketing manager, right? Create and distribute monthly newsletters. The second that you hear that from the manager, and all of us do the same thing, what do we need in this role? That's usually how it starts in intake, right? What do we need in this role? What do they need to do? I think a better question is, what do you need them to achieve? Because that helps you move from an activity like this, which is connected, by the way, and I'm going to show you the connection here in a second, right? Answer customer calls, respond to customer inquiries. Here's a longer one. Each one of these, you need a target result. You need a KPI and a target result in your job description in order for it to be effective. Tactics have their place, right? So when you see what we believe at Propulsion is a correctly written statement of responsibility in a job description, it kind of looks like this. Your job is to reduce days outstanding so that we improve cash flow. What does that do? That connects it to a business outcome that is significant. You are distributing meaning. You're not just writing a compliance document. You are connecting them to something that is overall critical to the business. On average, this is going to be about X percentage of your time. And then the tactics, we call these expectations. We call them starting tactics. And they're important because they create clarity. That's your job. These are some things that you're going to do along the way. Now, what's the ideal situation that you want? What do you want your manager, the situation you want your manager to be in? It's this. My job is reducing days outstanding. So I go to my boss and I say, wait, if that's my job, shouldn't I be doing these things? And my boss says, yeah, you should. I'm not on the front line. I don't see those things all the time. Yes, do those things. This is the non-negotiable. The statement of responsibility focused on outcomes becomes your not negotiable. These become the subject of experimentation. Now, why is that significant? Because the other thing you want is initiative. And these are concepts that as you're saying to your manager, hey, look, I understand the role design process is a little challenging, but here's the payoff. Because we want people who are going to come in and think ahead of the problem for you so that you can think about other problems. And that's why this structure has proven to be as effective as it is. So think about it, right? Here's about a quarter of your job. This is the result that you get. And when we put this now with a target result, you need to move the number from 90 to 60 in X amount of time. That becomes a really powerful combination. Now we're not talking about a job description as an administrative have-to document. We're talking about it as something that unlocks value. And remember, the value of this in that company example was nearly $1 million. They're going to spend about a quarter of their time doing it. Now, not the subject for today, but if you have compensation and bonus questions about how to make that process more fair, more equitable, and something that reinforces what you want, this is a key to unlocking that process as well, because you're about to be in a position where you pay people with money that they are making you. And that becomes pretty critically important. Here are some additional stats for you. I'm going to give you 2 seconds to read them on the screen. Now, I hope the value of the statistics is that it reinforces that despite the fact that these things are challenging to do, the shift of mindset is important and the shift of tactics is pretty important. And here's ultimately what you want. You want to bring these 3 things together. You want your managers to have salary is an investment as a mindset. You want to renew their focus on role design, and you want to shift their emphasis away from tasks and onto outcomes. And when you do that, you're going to create a job description that actually has value rather than something that you stick in a drawer or stick into a file and never look at again. And as a result, have clarity problems with your employee, have engagement problems with your employee, and have ownership problems with your employee. That's what you're trying to get away with, or get away from, by the way. And along that way, that process of having or of developing that really clear and compelling job description is going to reduce your hiring mistakes. It's going to raise your engagement. And if you think back to the stat that I gave you earlier, fully engaged employees tend to produce 16% more than we pay them. Fully disengaged employees, only about 60% of their payroll value. That's a huge swing between one and the other. And every role, when you write that job description using these 3 concepts, every role starts to take on meaning. So if you're in an organization right now where you're being told you're going to have to redesign and slim down, this technique is not just a hiring technique. It's a technique for driving value into the organization. We use it in talent acquisition because we're the tip of the spear. But the concept can be used for pivoting a role, used for your hypo employees, because it builds engagement at the same time that it's building commitment to the things that really matter within the business. Now, I'm going to pause for 1 second. I've got some other stuff to show you, but I'd like to get your reflections. You came in likely with a specific concept about what we were going to talk about related to job descriptions. And I want to kind of pause here early, or well, not super early, but with enough time that we can have a conversation about the light bulbs that are going on for you and the things that you think are going to be both advantageous for you and hard for you, driving this thought into your organization if you choose to do it. And I'm going to outlast you on this one because I think this is a critical discussion, and you've heard 45 minutes from me. I want to hear from you.
I can speak again. From my perspective, I work in a consulting firm, so they are very they build their time within 15-minute increments, and everything is very outcome focused. So I don't. It's been really interesting. So I just need to think through how this can be applied in my firm. But I think that will be back to what Audrey was saying about the change management piece. It would just be about helping them think about it in a different way. But they like and understand results. And so when kind of supplementing the discussions with how the results have kind of been proven, I think they'll be open to hearing a little bit more about it. But a lot of the way that they think about their job is we bill a client for X task that we're doing, and it's at this rate, and then we're kind of billing it every 15 minutes. So there's a lot of that energy that comes into it. But to the point that you're making about the quality of hire, I think this is a discussion that everybody understands is critical. So that's not really giving anything formulated, but that's just the kinds of things that are going through my mind as I was thinking about the session.
Rosalie, I think you raise an incredible point. Time is a huge factor. In fact, if we go back to one of the questions I asked you earlier, why is it that managers don't do it? You know what my principal answer is? It takes a long time to do right. Historically, it takes a long time to do right. And I'll give you the stat that comes from our customers, where our customers have told us how much time their humans take in a second. What other light bulbs are going on for you? Things that you think would be advantageous in your own business to take this thinking in, and things that'll be hard. Let me show you some final work product. Let me double check my screen. There we go. Okay, this is an example from one of our customers, Empath Health. And so what you're looking at is, and I'm gonna move this down. This is a critical care navigator role, as you can see from the job title. We start out every job description with a description of how that role contributes value. Employees want meaning. It's all over everything that's being published of substance right now, especially about Gen Z. They want to understand how their work goes beyond the daily tasks and contributes. We think this is a way to deliver it to them by starting out not talking about tasks, but talking about how you're going to build value in the organization. The bolded pieces are the ones that I showed you on the PowerPoint slide. They are the outcomes. And then you can see the tactics, the starting tactics that are associated with each one of them. We also think it's critical to have in a job description KPIs, and to have those KPIs be focused really on those outcomes and specific to those outcomes that you configured. This may not be every indicator, but they're the key performance indicators. The only thing that's missing here, and we don't happen to put it in the job description, but it is critical, those are the targeted results. What do? Patient satisfaction score, if you've identified that for this role as a KPI, really important. The challenge is it's still too ambiguous unless you say, here's where it is today and here's where I need it to be. That becomes the substance of the job. And then what fills out the job description for us are competencies and skills. Now, to the point that Rosalie made just a moment ago about time, I want to tell you something that I think is critically important, because there's an overwhelming amount of evidence. These are the stats that I put up for you about the costs of not hiring correctly. And even though these are not, I know for a lot of you, these are not new stats. And even in the face of what I think is overwhelming evidence, our customers tell us that doing this by hand takes 4 to 6 hours of total effort. But Rosalie, let me ask you something. If you could do this same process in about 15 minutes, would it be worth it?
Yeah, absolutely.
We thought so too. It's why we built the platform that we built. But you don't have to use the platform. I'm going to go back to my starting comment as we start to wrap up. You don't have to use our platform. I used this method for 15 years and drove value into organizations across 5 industries. The most important thing is that you are driving employees toward jobs that have meaning and purpose because they are going to stay with you longer. That is your secret to keeping your top talent. And you're setting your managers up for not having to micromanage those roles, which is going to multiply your efforts. Remember the stat, and I think it's the most important one. 20 to 30% of top line revenue gets consumed by misaligned employees and hiring mistakes. And I don't know, the organizations that I've worked in, performance management has been an equal challenge to getting the right talent in. Getting bad talent out is hard. And it's hard when you have to drive that through managers. So the tip of the spear function that we perform in talent acquisition becomes even more important. That we're attracting people who want to embrace that accountability, that we're setting them up with clarity to achieve those results, and that we are giving them something with purpose that ultimately keeps them in the organization. That's the key. I would love to tell you a little bit, Bill. I don't know whether this is appropriate at this time or not. I'd love to tell you a little bit about the platform. I'm equally happy to take those things one-on-one.
Yeah, no, I think this would be a good time. We've got about 5 minutes left. So I think it'd be a great time to talk a little bit about that. And yeah, it's a great transition point. So why don't you share that with us and we can learn a little bit about it. And then anyone who has any final questions, feel free to just raise your hand and we can talk a little bit about them.
So I'll give you the quickest version possible so we can get to people's comments and questions.
Okay.
The burning in the pit of your stomach that you had as I was talking about all of this, and the thing that went through your head that said, I don't know how I'm going to get my managers to do this. I dealt with that for a lot of years. And that's one of the reasons that I founded the company and built this platform. We created a digital human. Her name is Athena. She processes just like a human being would. Now, if I was going to sit down and do intake with you as a manager, here's what I would do. I would ask you some questions. You would give me some answers. I'd put things together, assign meaning to it. I'd give you some content. You'd give me some feedback. We would move on and I would build piece upon piece. That's how all of us do this as recruiters when we do intake. Athena processes in the same way. So she effectively interviews the manager directly about that role. But because she's digital, in the course of that interview, she is also writing a performance-based job description, complete with KPIs, turned into OKRs. She's writing an SEO-optimized job posting for the web, and they are different documents. The job posting is a marketing document designed to attract top 10% talent and scare away everybody else so that you and your teams don't go blind reading resumes. The job description is about creating clarity and purpose for the person that's actually in the role. You need both because you know that the second you get a candidate that's interested, they're going to say, can I see the job description? You want to send them something that hooks them even further in than what that job ad did that you put on the web. Athena also writes social media content that you can post directly to the corporate feeds or to your own personal feeds. And then she writes interviewer guides that take all of those elements that are in the job description and break them down into a structured format for interviews. You can try the platform free. It's an easy sign up, no credit cards required. We're convinced that once you try it, you're going to want to use it in your business. It's making a pretty substantial business, pretty transformational business impact for our customers. I'd love to take additional questions.
Yeah, awesome.
By the way, I think just to the point I made to Rosalie, rather than the 4 to 6 hours of effort, Athena does this in about 15 minutes.
Yeah, and it's nice to have that time returned and be able to leverage a tool like that to move through a process quicker. So that's awesome.
Oh, Bill, that's a great question. I don't know whether you see it in the chat. Bill asked why not just use ChatGPT? Great question. You have to lead ChatGPT. ChatGPT doesn't scale. You can't give ChatGPT to your managers and let them use it independently. We fixed all of those errors. This product, Athena, leads your manager through this process. She represents a blend of human and machine intelligence. It's nearly impossible for any user to make a mistake with her. And that means that the bandwidth that gets created is for you. That's how we transfer bandwidth out of this activity, yet generating that same high quality content and allow you and your teams to focus on candidates. Thanks for the question, Bill. It's a quiet group. I hope that there's value despite the silence. It's been a pleasure to share info with you. Bill, I know you'll have contact information for me. I am super happy to help you in this process. We don't offer consulting services. I don't charge for anything. But if you want some help thinking through this for your organization, shoot me a note on LinkedIn. I am happy to connect, and I am more than happy to help you.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And thanks everybody for being here. Again, I think Scott, you did a really good job of sharing a really tight message or thought around this, and I really enjoyed it because I think you hit on some key things. So great session. Glad everyone was able to make some time, and yeah, all of this will be available within the Talk platform. And if anybody has anything that any questions and want to reach out to Scott or through me, please just feel free to do so. And again, great use of time. I'm really glad you were here, Scott. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate the invite. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Scott.